Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. Today we begin a new challenge. This is going to be our Pro Tools journey. So shout out to G from Avid. He hooked me up with the full version of Pro Tools, but you can get the free version called Pro Tools Intro. I'll leave a link below. So what I'm going to challenge myself to do is relearn Pro Tools. I remember I went to LA and I booked some studio time and I gave some other producers some studio time as a thank you. And I went into the studio and basically they didn't show up one day or couldn't show up one day. So I was like, darn, I have the whole studio to myself. So me, Walter, and Harvey were just in there and just making songs. But the problem was the engineer didn't show up. So I was like walking into not only somebody else's studio, but I had to learn my way around Pro Tools, even though I use FL Studio mostly. And so I went into the studio. This is in Hollywood. Went into the studio. And because I was practicing Pro Tools before I went to LA, I had confidence to open up Pro Tools, know how to trigger my mic, know how to, move the vocals down, add effects, bust stuff together, do the basics. And that got me through an entire session. We actually made some pretty cool songs and had a lot of fun. So that's knowing nothing about technical, being an engineer for a session. Okay, at that time. Okay, so let's switch over and I have a beat we produced in FL Studio. We're going to drag and drop the files into Pro Tools and we're going to get the mixing. So today we're going to mix this beat. I may do some recording, but it depends on if I have bars or not. That's the real reality of it. Okay, so let's grab all these sounds. So what we're gonna do is just go into our hard drive, grab all the WAV files and just drag them into Pro Tools. That's the first step. So let's drag these in. And we just gotta make sure they're lined up to the left side. So that looks good. And firstly, let's just start leveling stuff. So by default, they're in this like gray color. So it looks like they're muted in FL. So what I'm gonna do is click this little left thing over here, this little expander. Grab these track names, hit shift, highlight them all, and just click this little track color, and let's make them red. Now I'm not gonna get into the the technicals about what should be red, what should be green. We're just gonna make everything red. So now let's just level. Let's turn stuff up, let's turn stuff down. Now by default, I just think Pro Tools has such a clean sound. Just off the default, you're gonna feel like your beat is mixed. I don't know what they do behind the scenes as far as the engine goes. And Decap has plenty of videos, where he debunks, the differences between DAWs. But from my experience, it's something about Pro Tools. It feels like it has extra height. It feels like it has a linear sound to it in a good way, not a bad way. It feels like your sound is sturdy. Whereas in FL, it just feels kind of like all over the place. All right, let's start turning stuff up and down. Let me get rid of this loop here. So I'm just turning the sample down a little bit. All right, let's get this bass rocking. So first thing I'm gonna do is add a compressor. So if you don't know how to mix, the basics are just compression, EQ, that's simple. Because you're shaping tone and the dynamics of a sound. That's basically all you have to do for any sound. Once you start getting complicated in the saturation and, delays and reverb and all that, that's more of a creative approach. But the basics are just compression, EQ. So whenever you're stuck, just compression, EQ. Keep it really simple. We're going to load up their built-in 1176 compressor. I'm going to push the inputs. Now we can hear those harmonics coming out of it. You can hit Control, left click to turn it on and off. So it is increasing in volume, so I'm going to pull down the output to match. So it's a little more shapely. It's less convex curvature, more concave curvature. It's very subtle. I'm not driving it too hard. Okay. Nextly, let's add an EQ. Now for this EQ, I'm going to use the built-in stock EQ. I might give you guys the project files. How about that? I'll give you guys the project files. If you go to BusyWorksBeats.com and look for the free downloads tab, I'll give you guys the project files. All right, so firstly, let's load up. And shout out to Help Me Devon, shout out to Wavy Wayne. These guys are like, Wavy Wayne is a master of Pro Tools. Help Me Devon is just chiseling out his own lane with artistry as well as Pro Tools. Then you got, who else is dope at Pro Tools? All the pros go to Pro Tools. I mean, there's infinite amount of pros. Shout out to Amon Jackson. Shout out to anybody. Realistic Production. Okay. So check out those guys for more Pro Tools type stuff and Mixbus TV. Okay, so where we at here? Let's add an EQ. Let's do EQ7 band. So this is their EQ called EQ3. Is this where Pro Q3 got the name from? I wonder. Okay, so let's boost up. We're gonna take this orange one and boost it up at 60 hertz. So my favorite zones for bass are 60 and 75. This is my favorite spots to boost the bass. Let's make this Q sharper. It just adds that feeling to the bottom end of the bass. I'm exaggerating so you can hear, but also let's check 75. It depends on the notes, which frequency sounds better. So if you're playing higher notes, chances are 75. If you're playing lower notes, 60 might work better for you. So to make the bass heard, we could add more harmonics through tape saturation. So let's add a track. Let's hit Control Shift N. Let's create I forget if that's a mono track or stereo, but let's just do mono, audio, and let's make this an aux input. Okay, so this is an aux track. So we're sending the volume of one track to another track called an auxiliary track. So on this track, it's a little difficult to understand the concept, so I equate it to kids going to school. So the tracks are the kids. The bus is like the bus that takes the kids to school, and then the school is the destination, track that you want to be on. So for example, I want to send the bass on bus number 1 that's going to school. So we're going to click here under where it says sends A to E, because we're sending a duplicate in this case. We're sending our kid off. So let's send this to bus number 1. Okay, 1 and 2 technically stereo, but let's do bus 1 because it's a mono track. I guess it doesn't matter. I don't know how it reads it, but let's just do bus 1 to make it simple. Okay, because we're going to a mono track. That's the one thing I will say that's different between Pro Tools and FL, is that in FL, it doesn't ask you, do you want to make something mono or stereo? Everything's kind of the same. It's all stereo. Whereas Pro Tools, you're going to be a little confused sometimes between mono and stereo and what should be mono, what should be stereo. So that's something that we're going to have to learn over time. So let's send this over. So we're going to click on this send amount. Basically, how much of the kid are we sending to the bus? So we need to send all the kid to the bus. So let's hit Alt, our option on Mac, and left click to reset that to 0. And now the aux isn't going to play anything because it's not, the kid isn't technically at school yet. So we have to import the bus into the school. So the input is going to be the bus number 1, in this case, mono. And now we have it basically doubled in volume. So it's sending its whole sound over to the aux. So now on the aux, we're going to load up a real tape. I forget the exact name for it. It's called Real something. But it sounds really good. I think it's Real Tape Saturation. I haven't used this in a while. So yeah, here it is. So this one sounds really good. So what I'm going to do is drive the signal and basically blend this into the original for the bass to create harmonic content. Hear that? Let me mute the original so we could, actually, let me see. I would have to just turn the output off. There you go. So now we're only hearing the saturation. It goes, so that's what we're trying to create is harmonics. Now we could use different ways to create harmonics. I'm also going to add this plugin called Smack. I never understood Smack. Now, technically, the way I would usually use it is on a snare, not on a bass. But I like to parallel compress in Pro Tools into Smack, usually on acoustic snares. But let's see what it sounds like with this type of bass. Let's add some more distortion here. Hear that bzzz type of sound? Now, because it's a mono track, if I started adding like chorus and stuff, it wouldn't be stereo spread. So I should have probably made that a stereo track so that we would have we could do stereo effects, but I don't feel like doing all that right now. So let's unmute the original. And let's do it. So I'll be muting the aux and turning it on and off just to see if it adds or takes away. Here's without. Oh, you know what? My bad. You can't hear anything because there's no output. There we go. See how it just kind of pulls that bass? It just gives it that extra little layer that it needs to poke out just a little bit. Also, we are increasing the volume too. It's part of it too. Okay, so we got the bass. Now let's worry about this kick. The kick, I don't think we need much. Now for kicks and stuff, I usually push them into a soft clipper, but this kick, I'm not gonna compress. I'm not gonna clip it by itself. I want to clip it into something. So that's where I'm going to clip it more on a mix bus on the master fader. Okay, let's deal with these hi-hats because these hi-hats have a little bit of, they have a little bit of low end in here. But it creates the entire groove. So let's add an EQ. Let's just chop out the lows using a high pass filter. So we're going to use HPF or high pass filter cut. Let's cut at like 80. And then let's cut at 24 dB per octave. Make sure you turn it on, which is in, or else you're not gonna hear anything. Now, if I exaggerate, we can cut it all the way up to about 200 hertz. But I think this takes some of the life out of the sound. So I do like some of the bass, we just don't want all of the bass. So let's cut it at 80. Not 808, 80. There we go. Kind of like the sound. Now, I want to widen it out, but I think it's already wide with, it's already wide enough. Okay, let's hear it in context though. Okay, so there's a little doo. I forgot we even had that. It's so tucked in the background, wouldn't have noticed it. So right about there, we have this little ooh. Okay, so what we could do is, it already has stuff on it, but let's create another aux. Now this aux, let's give it stereo properties. So let's go to aux input. This time, let's make it stereo so we could have like delays and reverbs. And let's call this like, let's double click, call it like creative effects. The other one we'll call mono. What do we do on this? Mono saturation / compression. Okay, so I understand the difference. Okay, so the creative effects, what we're gonna do again is send the kid onto the bus. So we need to send an amount. Let's send the vocals onto bus. Now this one, we wanna have a different bus because we don't want the kids to go on the same bus because they might fight. All right, so different buses go to different schools. So in this case, this vocal bus 3 and 4, we're gonna send that to a different school, metaphorically speaking. So now the vocals are gonna be sent on bus 3 and 4 to the school called Creative Effects. Now the Creative Effects doesn't know which buses are coming to the school, so we have to tell it which input, and it's gonna be bus 3 and 4 goes to this school. So when you think about sound as like kids and then, busing like an actual bus that goes to a school, it makes a lot more sense. Because in Pro Tools, in FL, you could just route everything to a group, but in Pro Tools, you have to route it to a group and then route the group to something. So it's an extra step that you might not be used to in FL. Okay, so that's why I'm using the bus analogy. So under the creative effects, let's add some like delay. Let's do mod delay. I really love their delay effects because it's like, how do I explain this? It's signal based, so the delay won't kick in until after the thing has died down, basically. So let's hear what this sounds like. Let me. Okay, so first I could tell it's. Now I don't have the tempo of the track. That's one thing that I have to get used to is understanding how to tempo lock and all that. I forgot the tempo. I want to say it's like 95. But over here we could type the tempo. If you double click, just type it in. And then now it should read any sync information as far as like when this says sync, it means locking it to a tempo. So in this case, we're locking that to the tempo, and then we could put it on different measurements. Let's add some modulation, which is pitch modulation. That sounds crazy. Now I'm going to send that through a reverb called Deverb. Okay, very good reverb built inside of Pro Tools. Again, I don't know what the Pro Tools intro has, but again, you can get Pro Tools completely for free with Pro Tools intro. A lot of people don't even know Pro Tools offers a free DAW. So it's called Pro Tools intro. I'm going to leave a link below. Again, I have the full version. G gave it to me from Avid. Shout out to G. And so I was already a paid subscriber for years. on here. Okay, so now the delay is going through reverb, so now it feels very spatial. Just has a vibe to it. Now it sounds cool. Okay, let's turn. And now we can turn the amount down so it's not so loud. So you can barely tell it's there. Let's work on this sample a little bit. So the sample is already a song, so I don't want to like overly EQ and compress an already existing song. So what I'll do is just send this to one of our pre-made buses. Let's go to bus. Now this, I should have made it stereo. Now I'm thinking about it, but let's see what it sounds like in mono. I have no idea what this is going to sound like, but let's see. So we have soloed the compression and saturation track. It's adding like a type sound. It's like kind of like that sound. Even though we're pushing the sound, it feels so clean. This is why I love Pro Tools, because it's a very clean sound we're not used to in FL. Man, this track is just coming alive. There's just these little things about Pro Tools that just adds life to something. Okay, so let's loop this, put it on loop play. So now I'm just trying to think what else we can add to this track. Turn down these. Never mind, let's keep it where it was. I'm going to turn up the delay because I want it to feel more like a ethereal type sound. So let's go back and let's add that. Turn the snare up just a little bit. I feel like the snare, just even that 0.6 dB was just, it took it over the edge a little too much. So I'm mixing into a limiter called L2 from Waves. This one's just really sturdy. I use it because of video tutorials and stuff. It's just a lightweight limiter. I think the track is really done. Now let's just move on to, now again, this isn't a full thought out mix, but on the master fader, I would usually do a sub mix called a stereo mix, but in this case, we'll just put it on the master fader. So you have to ask, does this track need more crunch? Does it need more saturation? What does it need to add an extra thing to it? I think it's fine the way it is. So what I'm gonna do is just EQ and compress. So again, it's just compression, EQ. That's the normal kind of go-to. Let me think, what kind of compressor would I do on the 2 track? Let me think. There's so many. So I'm gonna try to keep this stock. I think, is this stock Fairfield 670? I might be wrong. I don't know if this is stock Pro Tools or what. They might have a different name for it. Oh yeah, here it is. So I'm gonna push it until I hear the sound. Oh, it's not even linked. Whoops. Okay, let's do, how do you link these? All right, they're not linked by default. Let me see if there's a shortcut. Okay, if I hit shift, that's how, okay. Let's reset these. My bad, I was compressing the left differently than the right on that one. So I'm just trying to hear the volume of sound that goes through this. So it goes like, me, and then it turns the volume down. We're gonna That one I'm not hearing so much of a groove on the sound, but regardless. Okay, so the compressor, let's add an EQ. So I think on the EQ, this track doesn't really need much of anything. But let's just do a quick little sweep to see if we can enhance anything. Oops, wrong curve. So you see if I boost at 130, it becomes a little more muffled. But it adds that body to the sound though. Around 200 gets the bottom of the snare, but it kind of muddies up the track. Here we have that boxiness of the kick and also some of the boxiness tones in my vocal. Here's more of like a nasal area, 600. That's where a lot of resonance happens too. At 700, people don't check that frequency. So I'm not really hearing much to boost. I did like the 200 area, so let's see what we can do here. Now it does make it a little more muffled, but it makes it muffled in a 90s type of way, not in a can't hear the beat type of way. Then from here, you might go into a clipper. Now I'm going into like, you know, different processes. You don't need to add a clipper here. We're just going to do it for tone more than volume control, or more than, I should say, loudness. Let's add this on crisp mode. Pull down the threshold a little bit. See if we're clipping. Then you can mess with the inputs if you want more drive on the sound. It's like this is too loud for no reason. Let's bypass this plugin. Here's without. It does bring out some higher tones. So for that benefit, I'll keep the clipper because it adds some more like top end. Okay, and then what else do? We added EQ, compression, clipping. That's pretty much it. Now, if you wanted to take it all the way with that distorted type of sound, you can mess with the saturator. Hopefully I didn't crash Pro Tools just now. Okay, Saturn. So FabFilter Saturn is what I would usually use on a group of sounds. FabFilter Saturn 2 specifically. Okay, so on this warm tape, this sounds really good. But let's add a modulation envelope so that it only triggers when the kick hits. So let's click here, let's set a threshold. So you can see only when that kick hits a certain volume will this turn on. But again, this adds tone to the sound, so you gotta be careful. So I'm gonna turn it off. This is what I use. So before in other videos, I would forget to turn this to 0. So when you add the modulation, you have to make sure the mix is down so that this has an envelope, or else it's just always on. So I was tricking myself last couple of videos. So now this only saturates when it goes above the threshold, but you have to make sure to turn the mix down to 0. I'll exaggerate so you guys can hear. So listen to when the kick hits versus the rest. I learned that from Sage Audio. Shout out to Sage Audio. Shout out to Panorama Mastering too. He's dope. And Ken Lewis. How could I forget Ken Lewis? And Matthew Weiss. Who else is dope on the mixing stuff? Crispy Akiyama. There's so many dope people. But I learned this trick specifically from Sage Audio. Shout out to him. All right, so that sounds dope to me. I don't think we need to really do anything else. See how the track just has like width, it has dimension. Something about Pro Tools just gives it that thing that we don't get in FL Studio. one more bass I didn't mix yet. I'm not gonna worry about that bass. I went in on this beat. This beat is crazy. I gotta say I'm proud of myself for that beat. That beat came out crazy. All right, I'll play it one more time just so we can see our masterpiece. Let me mute my mic. Quick caveat, the only thing I didn't mix is the secondary bass. I really wouldn't even do much to it, but maybe compress it and add a little saturation just to make it buzz a little bit more. But I wouldn't even do much to it except for leveling. But I didn't mix that just for time's purposes. That beat is kind of nasty, but I'm gonna give you guys the project file so you can play with it and mix it, start from scratch, whatever you want to do. Go download Pro Tools Intro. It's completely for free. I'll leave a link below. Shout out to G from Avid. This is gonna be a fun series because I'm motivated again to mix. Peace out, guys.